Hi and welcome to the Happiness Safari podcast. I'm so happy you're listening. Today on the podcast I speak to Alham from Nairobi, Kenya. I met her last year when I was teaching at Bikram Yoga Nairobi, and I remembered her as a powerful and happy woman. But during our interview I learned that she is so much more than this. Alham is a mother of three, a vaginal steam facilitator, and a yoga instructor. She recently moved to Kenya from Seattle with her small family to nestle her roots. She studied Anthropology and Human Rights with a speciality in Linguistics in London. She loves art and capturing beauty. She most feels at home behind a lens or on her yoga mat. She reveals in travel, reading, and eating the yummiest cakes. Her enclave is in a small bookshop and her therapy vintage stores. She's a lover of antiques and wholesome conversations. With Alham, I speak about motherhood and the duality between extreme love and worries, about postnatal depression, Bikram yoga, mirror work, video journaling, religion, and traveling to Mekka. From Alham, you will learn how something which feels sad at the moment can be the best thing ever happened to you, why gratitude can change everything, why life happens for you and not to you, how you can prioritize yourself and take time for yourself, even if you have 3 children, how video journaling can help you to reflect on yourself and get the answers which are already inside of you, why it is so important how we talk to ourselves, and how you can teach your children by inspiration. I felt so blessed and happy during and after this interview. Talking to Alham was truly inspiring, and I cannot wait to share it with you. I hope you will find it inspiring as well. Enjoy listening. Hi everybody, welcome to the Happiness Safari podcast, and I'm so happy to speak to Alham today. Welcome. So nice to see you.
Hi. You too. Thanks for having me.
How are you today?
I'm doing well today. Yeah.
Would you like to share a little bit about yourself? Tell the listeners who you are.
Sure. My name is Ahlam. It means dreams in Arabic. And I was birthed with much ease. So that's why my mom called me Ahlam. I'm currently residing in Nairobi, Kenya. I am a mother of 3 beautiful children, a vaginal steam facilitator, yoga instructor, and also I dabble in fashion, anthropology, and lots of beautiful things. That's who I am.
Wow, and that's a lot of things in a nutshell. Yeah, we met in Nairobi when I was teaching yoga there, and just remember your positivity and smiling, happy face through all the struggles of the of the classes. And what I loved about also practicing in Kenya, we had a little chat about that before. It's like there's such an amazing community, and people usually don't really care or judge you or how you look, what you do, who you are. They're just very lovely and compassionate, and there's always a chat going on in the ladies' changing room that I love that so much. So I remember also that you gave me so many good advice about traveling in Kenya and about Lamu and places to visit. Oh. And it's such a lovely place there.
So, Lamu is my favorite place. People should definitely check out Lamu.
So people, if you come to Kenya, you let us know. I give you all the insight about Lamu. And then I know you had quite a journey in so many different ways, you lived in so many different places, but then obviously being a mother of 3 children is also a journey itself, and then your career as well. Would you say there was a time in your life where you're starting a journey towards happiness or a happier life? Maybe we spoke about before that there was some time of reflection. You like to share a little bit about that?
Yeah, I would say the first time I journeyed into myself was after a breakup. I had
Okay.
I had a wonderful eat, pray, love experience when I was 20, shortly after graduating from university. And it was my current husband, who at the time we broke up.
Oh,
We broke
wow.
up. Yeah, we
Okay.
broke up, and it made me sort of really reflect upon a lot of things. I was very young at the time, very unexperienced. I sort of was like, no, I need to step back and find out who I am and why am I so crushed by this experience. And at home, I'm known as the strong one, and everyone comes to me for their problems and, you know, the role of cheering them up. And I felt like I couldn't have that space to break down in my space. So luckily, my friend was working in Abu Dhabi and the Middle East, and she randomly texted me one day and said, hey, are you interested in a job? I said, of course I am. And within 2 weeks, I was out. And the beauty of being in that part of the world is that you can travel to different parts of the world. So every other weekend. And this was 10 years ago. This is 10 because we'll be celebrating our 10th anniversary this month. This was 10 years ago, actually. And I traveled to different places. And back then, I didn't have social media. I don't even think, I'm sure like Facebook was coming up at the time, but I didn't have any social media. I had to buy one of those phone cards to call my parents, which wasn't quite often. So I had complete solitude to myself. I've had complete solitude to myself, and I've had moments where I've really, really had to ask myself some really tough questions. And I felt, and back then, because now it's so polarized, this concept of working on oneself is so polarized, it's everywhere, and people share their stories, which is so comforting at the same time. But I didn't have that, and I felt very vulnerable as well to share with some of my friends as well, because I didn't want people to know that I'm crying over a boy, like. But that was the first time that I traveled, and I traveled to different places, and I became deeply in tune with who I am and myself, and it was just very, very refreshing. And so, and then he came back into my life a few years later, and it was completely different. Yeah.
Wow. That's really cool. Thank you so much for sharing. So would you say it was also different because then actually you changed and you were in a different place? So then you could kind of find each other on a different level and build something else based on that.
Definitely. I would say I definitely changed, and it fine-tuned the kind of people I attracted. And I would say he was also on his own journey, and somehow the frequency met and we were able to rekindle and start fresh again.
Wow, that's actually very, very beautiful and inspiring story, because I guess at that point in your life when you broke up and you actually felt the way you felt and very like vulnerable and sad, that you didn't really think there was something good coming from that, probably, right? Or would you say now that was actually a good thing that you broke up at that point?
We had to break up. I really think we did, because I wouldn't have been the woman that I am. I wouldn't have been the woman that I am today. I wouldn't have had a great sense of, I wouldn't have had the depth of what it means to love and be loved. It would have been an unequal mode of love.
Wow, that's really beautiful. Or what do you say is does happiness mean to you?
Happiness means many things. Happiness, honestly, just thinking about the word in itself in its authentic sense means so many different things to me. But I think if I was to put it in a nutshell, it means a contented heart and a consistent contented heart. And that can be maintained with gratitude. We've witnessed over the last few years, especially with the pandemic, and just how fragile life is and how ever-changing and ever-evolving and so rapidly fragile it is. And I think what really helped me in those moments was gratitude. Just knowing that I'm alive, I'm able to see the sun, I'm able to breathe, I'm able to hug my children at night. I'm able to have really deep conversations with my loved ones. I'm able to comfort and be comforted. I'm able to love and be loved. I'm able to be vulnerable. So yeah, those are the things that define love. I mean, happiness for me.
I mean, happiness can be love as well, or I think can be connected. And I think that's very nice, and I mean very true also that it is related to gratitude. I feel that like comes up all the time, like kind of being grateful for what you actually have, and that gives you that sense of contentment. So you already kind of gave us a hint. What would you say you do to be happy or to maintain that happiness and that contentment?
Spirituality, gratitude, knowing a higher divine power, and knowing that I am safe. I'm safe. Even in the rainstorms, I am safe. Knowing that life happens, so there's a quote that I don't know if I'm butchering it, but life happens. It doesn't happen to us, or is it life? I'll have to find that quote for you.
It doesn't happen to you, but it happens for you.
Yeah, it happens for you. And I feel like everything in life, it's like a dotted line. And at the moment, we might be just seeing a small pixel of that image, but we don't see the full artistry and the tapestry of what it really is. And sometimes you find out in the process, or sometimes you find out later on when you're on the other side of that experience. I pray. I make an intention to pray, both physically as a Muslim, but also for humanity. Sometimes I just sit down and I just make a prayer for myself, for my neighbors, for my loved ones, for the world. Another thing that keeps me happy is seeing beautiful colors in nature and in people and in clothes and fashion. Like admiring beauty is what makes me happy. Being with my children and sometimes being a stay-at-home mom, I'm like, I want to run away. And I do give myself moments to actually run away. And I mentioned that I took 2 solo trips in the last couple of months, which was nice. Yeah, which was really nice. I'm so grateful that I have that opportunity to just go away for a few days or a week and spend that moment to myself. So yeah, that gives me immense sense of happiness. So yeah.
Wow, that's amazing, actually. I mean, that you also do that and you kind of listen to yourself and you give yourself what you need, because I feel like often when you're like a mother of like, especially like 3 children, I feel like there are probably many listeners who think like they can't really do it, or they don't really take the time for themselves. Like, I know I spoke to many parents who kind of like are losing themselves a little bit. And of course you like enjoy the moments with your children, but I guess you're enjoying them even more when you are apart from them for a couple of days, and then you come back and you are refreshed and in your own energy and in a space where you can like give them even more.
Absolutely, yeah. It's molding, like honestly, raising children. Like I said, we mentioned earlier, I'm in between the duality, and I'm sure most parents can agree. You're in between the duality of extreme love, like you've never experienced such love. Maybe with a puppy, I don't know. But it's like you have extreme love on one side, and then on the other side, you have this extreme sense of worry of what could happen, and so you're stuck in the duality of that space. And for me, taking moments to myself is also teaching them that it's okay to take time out for yourself. And we have this self-care moments in our house. And my little son made plaques of meditation, spa nights. So we have different plaques. I should have one that says "Do not disturb," because my kids disturb me sometimes when I'm doing work. But yeah, so we have little plaques, and sometimes, and even for them to have the verbiage of, Mom's meditating, or I just need some peace and quiet to myself, or I just need a moment to myself. Oh, they take off their shoes sometimes when they forget to wear their shoes in the garden, and then I'm like, "Where's your shoes?" And they're like, "I'm grounding." So I'm like, "Okay, I guess I'll just wash your feet."
That is cute.
Yeah, just having the verbiage. And so with in terms of taking time away, honestly, it was the most petrifying thing for me to do. But I trust my partner, and I trust the loving community that I have around me. My mother, my dad, my in-laws, my mother-in-law, and my sisters. I'm so blessed to have a community of people around me that love me. And even in this international sort of space that I'm in at the moment in Nairobi, my mother-in-law flies in, so she came to stay with us for a month, and I was able to go. But it started off with just an overnight stay at my friend's house. And we had a spa night there, and then I came back the next morning and I felt so amazing. And then it started off with a weekend trip with my friend, and then it started off with maybe another weekend by myself, or another day, or an overnight somewhere. So it can, or even just your husband or your parents taking the kids. It can start very small before taking an international flight. Yeah.
Wow. Oh, but that sounds really amazing, and it seems like you're doing really good. And I also think that what you do is actually kind of raising children by inspiration. I feel if you want to, it's much better for them to learn actually through your behavior and what you practice. Like you're practicing what you preach instead of telling them what to do, but then not really showing them that's the right way to live. So I think that's very inspiring. I mean, for the listeners, but for your children as well. I think that's a beautiful way to teach them what is important. And yeah.
Thank you.
What was the happiest moment in your life?
Oh, I've had many, many, many happy moments, honestly. And I think, but the most happiest moments were the most simplest moments for me. Yeah, life is truly simple. The happy for me was when I had my children. I didn't even know I could have children. Not in the biological sense, but I didn't know I was capable of being a mother. And I'm a middle child. I'm a very selfish child. I grew up very spoiled, loved. So I didn't know that I could share, outside of my husband. So when I had my kids, it was like, oh my goodness, I love you. Especially when I had my daughter, which really, really, really sort of inspired me, because when I gave birth to her and I had a look, it was almost like she was a reflection of me. It was just like, oh my goodness, I birthed myself, and now I want this new version of me, of her, to be, to just have the best example of life. And with first child, I went through postnatal depression, and I didn't know. After being a career woman, I had a moment, then transitioned to being a stay-at-home mom, and it was very, very difficult for me, even though it's honestly such a privilege to be a stay-at-home mom. For me, it was the most hardest thing I've had to do in my life. And obviously now I'm a lot more appreciative for the fact that I was able to stay at home, and I'm still able to have the flexibility. But at the time, it was just like, what am I doing with my life? And so, yeah, it jolted me into experiencing postnatal depression. I didn't have access to good therapists at the time. So the happiest moments was overcoming that, first of all, birthing my daughter, going through therapy and overcoming some things, and just realizing, I had to go through those things. Like, life is not linear. Like, life comes to you in moments, and I've had to go through those things for me to know what I know and guide them through life. I got married. It was also a happy moment, because I got married. I feel like people say, you find someone you find someone that completes you. I feel like you find somebody that complements you. You must be complete before you. So for me, I felt complete. And when I took my vows, I felt complete, and I felt happy, and I felt like I was ready for this journey. Seeing my parents after long travels, because at the moment I'm living in all these different places and I don't get to see my parents as much as I'd love to. So seeing my parents makes me absolutely happy. Connecting with friends, eating amazing food, having food delivered. And you can just imagine, like, we live in Nairobi, so sometimes you're craving a taste and you're like, oh, can you find me that sweet in the, somewhere in Casablanca, and then somehow somebody brings that sweet to you and it's like, this is heaven. Or like sweets from like back home, like England, or it's just amazing. Or just burning frankincense as well is another thing that I really enjoy. Listening to spiritual text, to reading spiritual text, seeing smiles. So many different things make me happy. Right?
Wow, but yeah, so many beautiful things, from like, I think, the very little things to the very big things in life. What you also said is that happiness sometimes comes with sadness as well, or when we experience the sadness, then we can like appreciate the happiness even more. When you said you had to like overcome your did you remember what was your biggest kind of realization, or like what kind of changed your life, like doing therapy?
So many different things. So my first experience with therapy, and like I said, the world of social media and therapy has thoroughly changed over the years. Even the concept, even after talking about postnatal depression, it was not something that I had access to 7 years ago. So my thing was, I lived in a very affluent place and I had access to an amazing insurance company, whatever. I had access to things, and somehow I couldn't find myself a good therapist. And every therapist that I found either judged me. I felt judged. I didn't feel like I was related to, even though as a woman, postnatal depression. Postnatal depression is such an experience and part and parcel of being a mother sometimes. I just couldn't find that the therapist that I've met could transcend and meet me where I needed to be, where I needed to be met. And it's no fault of their own, honestly, because like I said, therapy has changed dramatically over the years. But what helped me tremendously, and this is something that I encourage all my friends to do, is doing video journals. So on my laptop, I have this record device. I think it's called Photo Booth. Yeah. So I just used to open Photo Booth and speak to myself. Wow. It sounds quite bizarre talking about it now, but I just used to speak to myself and talk about my feelings, the things that really gave me deep fears, what worried me, and a lot of the things that came up and I was able to sift through was that I needed support from my family. Even though my husband was tremendously helpful, I felt like I needed a tribe of women around me, which is very instinctual, because when a woman births, it takes a whole village to look after a woman and a baby. So I was able to hear that. I was able to hear that I'm okay to tell people that I'm actually still not able to connect to my child, which for me, I was like, oh my goodness, how can I share that as a new mom? And you're around moms that are completely in awe of their children. I did have that awe, but it was also a sense, it was accompanied by a sense of fear. I'm like, oh my goodness, what if I hurt you? I don't want to hurt you, where you've mentioned that space of love and fear can coincide in the same space. So yeah, just looking at myself. And then sort of weeks later, I would go back to the videos and just see how far I've come in my journey. And then I continued, and then I incorporated small things into my routine, i.e., I'm going to promise to go yoga tomorrow at 7 a.m. before my husband goes to work. And then I would wake up and be there. And the next morning would be like, a few weeks later, would be like, maybe I should do the morning walk with my friend at 6:30 before yoga. And then I did that. And then it was, little things that I would promise myself to do, or, keep a journal today and only say nice things about yourself, because one time I said I was doing something and I was like, oh, I'm such an idiot. And my husband turned around and was like, why would you're not an idiot. And I was like, oh my goodness, I have a child who's listening to this. And of course I know I'm not an idiot, but it's such an habitual language that we've incorporated into our everyday, language. And for me, English is not my first language. I speak a multitude of languages. And I found that sometimes English can be limiting, but it's so habitual at the same time because it's spoken everywhere. And sometimes, like in my language, I could have found another word. For example, in Arabic, I could have found another word. But I just leaned into that, I'm an idiot. And I was like, oh no, I'm not, no. So then I'd incorporate that into the video and say, okay, I'm not going to do that again. So yeah, that's how I was able to overcome, is just holding myself, honestly, just taking a moment to hold myself. And holding myself also meant physically, just hold myself and in the bath, cry when I want to, and tell myself that I'm actually doing okay as a mama. I'm all right. I don't have to be the best mom. I just have to be a good mom for my son. And and he's a happy child. And he's actually looking at me at the moment from the garden. And that's my goal, is to raise just happy children. And it makes me cry because our intentions and our the world might not facilitate what our intentions are, but it's so crucial to facilitate that at home, in the small moments, with our children.
Yeah.
That's why I'm so old school with technology. Honestly, I'm like an oldie with technology. I still know what's happening, but as long as I have the basics to communicate, I'm fine. So we have no technology, no TV, and it works for us. Yeah.
Wow. So now there are actually so many things you shared there. I want to kind of dive in a little bit more. I mean, first, I think the video journaling is a super, super good tool. I would love to share with our listeners, actually. So you said there is a special app or program you're using?
I use a photo booth. And the reason I didn't do it with my phone is because I didn't want to be on the go doing these journal entries. I wanted to sit down, be intentional with the time that I give. I was very much like, today, after my son takes a nap, I'm going to sit down after my tea, after my prayer, and give myself 20 minutes to do a check-in. So,
nice.
Yeah.
So have you done every day 20 minutes, or would that be the time frame?
Yeah, I gave myself a time frame, an arbitrary time frame, but sometimes I went over and sometimes it was less.
For how long did you do it? Or are you still doing it? Or did you?
I still do it.
I still do it. Wow.
And it's in and out. It's in and out of so sometimes I go back into it and I'm consistent with it. And then sometimes I take a break. But I do find other ways in with myself. This time without, being recorded, but I just, I'm just like, so during my morning ritual or my night ritual, when I burn my incense, it's like, I've had a wonderful day today, and I've accomplished this, or I've had this little, fear that was niggling in my, niggling in my heart today, or things like that. So yeah, I do that. And just last week, actually, my daughter was saying she speaks to herself. I'm like, oh, that's wonderful. And she's like, I don't find it weird at all. And I was like, no, it's not weird. It's absolutely fine.
Yeah.
She must have glanced over maybe someday and saw me speaking to myself. But yeah.
Yeah. But it's so interesting because I feel like just yesterday I listened also to a podcast interview where they're actually sharing that they made studies with people who survived like the Second World War, who survived actually like Auschwitz or the concentration camps. They've been kind of silent about their feelings for like 40 plus years, not sharing their stories. And because it was so kind of like horrible what they experienced, like they felt they couldn't really like share that with other people because nobody kind of wanted to hear that, and they didn't want to like maybe drag them down. And then there was this guy who started to interview them, so they were able to share. And there were actually like studies then that even like a year after that they felt like so much better and happier, and they started to also share that with others. But it gave them so much kind of relief that they could actually speak about it. Then they mentioned that that is actually very therapeutic just to talk about things. So it's not even if you're a therapist or a coach or a friend, but as you say, like if you do video journaling, it's just like important to kind of get it out of your system in a way. And then also when you actually speak out the words, then kind of it gives another like structure like in your brain, so you have the possibility to kind of organize the chaos, let's say, whatever is going on, and then after you're feeling better when you let it out. So I think that's a super cool tool. And I think for the listeners it doesn't really matter. I can share the for everybody who has a Mac, like the app you're using, but I'm sure there are other ways to record videos, or you could just do it with your phone as well. But I like that kind of taking the time to sit down and do it maybe at the same place and having that moment where you do it. But I find it super inspiring.
Yeah, I really love that story that you mentioned. I'd love to read it about that as well. And it's definitely so. What I love about the the video journal, specifically the video, is that you visually see yourself. And pain has a physical implications on ourselves as well, like stress, for example. Like you physically feel different. You're hunched over. You're sad. Your eyes might be red, for example. So for me, it was also seeing myself physically and just seeing a shell of a woman that I don't really recognize. When I went back into my, when I went back weeks later, I was like, oh, who is she? Who have I become? That is me. But I also found a way to be compassionate with myself and give space to that woman that was reflected to me. And knowing that we go through waves in lives and nothing ever stays consistent, but what we must maintain is a sense of who we are and that comfortability to be able to talk to ourselves about ourselves. And for me, I found that when I went to therapy the first time, I sort of was a bit orchestrated because I'm this veiled Black woman that's coming into an office in an area that's predominantly of a different race, and I'm talking about issues from a country that's completely foreign to some people, and they're just like, what is going on? And I just so it was very, very interesting, and just giving myself that space to say, you know what, Ahlam, just give yourself 10 minutes today, make your tea while your baby is sleeping, and let yourself pour. And sometimes it was just me staring at myself because I just had nothing to say. Sometimes it was me just being, sometimes it was me just listening to something else, but it was just me being with the uncomfortable feeling of being with myself, if that makes sense. So for some of the listeners who don't have access to a computer or who may not have access to a telephone, I like I don't know what her name is, but I really love this woman, Louise Hay. She does mirror work. Mirror work. So she has introduced the concept where you can speak different affirmations to yourself in front of a mirror. So you don't necessarily have to do the affirmations, but just standing still and looking at yourself in the mirror for a few moments You can be clothed and nude, whatever's to your comfortability, but just knowing that we have to be okay in our skin. We have to be okay in who we are in our, so to speak, shells. Because if we're not okay in the space that we're abiding in at the moment, we can't expect the world to reflect reflect love to us, rather. You know, the world will always reflect love to you because that's just the bounty of who the one is. But through humans, the energy is going to be so uneven, you know. So
that mirror work, like I put that in the show notes as well, and I have actually done that when I was going through a depression myself, and also when I lived in the UK. I feel like somebody gave me the advice, and I spoke like some affirmations, and I just said, I love you, and I see you, and I accept you, like, to myself. And I said that every morning to myself in the mirror. Yeah, it definitely helped. I mean, like, I cried a lot as well, but I think that's also the same thing what we have with Bikram Yoga, because with Bikram Yoga, we always have the mirrors, and we are kind of forced to like look inside that mirror for like 90 minutes. And I feel we are like not used to it, to really look at kind of our souls, like look ourselves in the eyes, and not, because usually when we're in front of a mirror, like we check, like, how do I look? Like, how do my clothes look? Like, how is my makeup or my hair? But we don't really look at ourselves. And I feel like in Bikram Yoga, we're like forced to do that. And I know it's like so uncomfortable. And it was also so uncomfortable for me when I like started my practice. And I see that with like new students, like they look on the floor and they look on the ceiling and they look everywhere. But to look at yourself and like see who you truly are, and what you say, like, we are actually love, and we are more than our like physical appearance, and to see that can be very healing.
Absolutely. And I discovered yoga. Well, my husband introduced me to Bikram Yoga, and during that breakup phase, it was the most beneficial thing to me. Like, it was the most, oh my goodness, because with Bikram Yoga, you know, your hair is up, you're wearing no makeup. In my case, I had to, you know, tie my scarf backwards, and you're sweating. And the beauty of the sweat is that sometimes your tears can be disguised with the sweat, and it's complete silence. All you hear is the teacher's voice and your sheer determination. The dog bore, the English dog bore determination in the mirror. And it's just you and you and that guiding voice. And I take that concept with me everywhere. It's just me and the guiding force. So yeah, Bikram Yoga is tremendously transformative. Yeah,
it definitely is. I should do an episode just about that. I feel. Is there any book you've read that changed your life, really inspired you?
Books, yes. Quote, but the beautiful quote that I love to share with people. I'll start with a quote, and then I'll give you a book recommendation.
Okay.
A book recommendation, because there's so many. Is people will meet you as deeply as they've met themselves. So when you're on this journey of going deeply into yourself, you will encounter so many different people, and even the friends and the network around you will somehow become different, and you'll have a new lens to life and a new perspective and ways of looking at things. So for me, when I stumbled upon that quote, is at a time where the people around me were really changing, and it was almost like, you've changed, how dare you change? But I was like, don't you want me to grow? Don't you want me to, like, you know, delve into the vastness of life and love and self-appreciation? Like, why does it offend you that I've changed? And so coming across that quote for me was like, they're on their own journey, and sometimes it's quite daunting to go inside and really look at the inner workings of for yourself. It's the most daunting thing you could ever do. I feel anyway. It's quite to really confront yourself is not an easy task. So yeah, I love that quote, and I share that with my peers, my students, with my friends, with my, sometimes when people come to me and they complain about somebody, I'm like, just know that person is not where you are yet. And it's nothing personal. They're on a different trajectory, and so are you. So that's a quote that I love, and I don't know who said it, and I should know. But it's just when I came across it, I was like, wow, so that's, people will only meet you as deeply as they've met themselves. A book that I love so much, oh my goodness. First of all, I love the Holy Quran. I love my spiritual texts, and it took me a while, actually, even though I was born and raised as a Muslim, it took me a while to sort of come to appreciate my faith, because it was always a thing that was like, oh goodness, Muslims are crazy. So for me, it was like, even though I grew up in such a loving family, in such a loving community, and I've read, the Quran, and I was able to memorize some chapters in my youth, it's just, I haven't looked back at it. So when I got married and moved to Los Angeles, I took a very scenic route to spirituality, and I delved into meditation from the perspective of Buddhism and Taoism and other things. And it always led me back to the simplicity of the Quran and spiritual texts. And I love reading the Bible as well. So it always led me back to that. And so I love reading spiritual texts. That's definitely on top there. I'll show another book that I put, two books by the same author, is The Alchemist. I just loved it. And manuscripts from Accra. Okay. That I would say that was, manuscripts from Accra was a great book, well, by the same author.
Nice. I read the Alchemist as well by Paulo Coelho, and actually, thank you for mentioning, because nobody has mentioned it so far, and I feel that's like one of the most kind of inspiring spiritual books you could read, and it's also such a nice story, and it's a short book actually, but it is so profound, and just and I feel everybody gets something else out of it. And probably also if you read it multiple times, you get new learnings out of it. But may I ask, how do you teach, I think, religion or spirituality to your children? When you read the Quran and the Bible, but then you're also such a spiritual person, do you teach them all of the different aspects?
So I teach them the foundations first, the foundation of love, kindness, generosity, and they each have a prophetic name. So my oldest one is Khalil. That's also another name that was given to Abraham, Prophet Abraham. So I teach them about the stories of Abraham. My daughter is called Maryam. That's also Mary, the mother of Jesus in the Bible and the Quran. And then my other youngest one is called Musa, which is the story of Moses and in the Bible and both the Quran. So I start off by just teaching them about the stories of who their names were inspired by. And I was very intentional with every pregnancy to connect spiritually. And by reading those stories of the prophets, those names sort of came to me. And Khalil means a loyal friend. Prophet Ibrahim was a friend of God. And so I was very intentional in naming my kids names that would sort of get them through life. And my intention was that I wanted my firstborn, Khalilullah, to know that he too can be a friend of God. That name was not limited to the Prophet Ibrahim, that he too can be a friend of God. And if ever he goes through life and loses his footing or loses his path, I want him to know that you also have that connection. And Mary, for me, the story of Mary is just so tremendous. It's so vast and so encapsulating of a womanhood, the childhood of Mary, the miracle of the birth of Jesus, alayhi salam. And so I really just wanted her also to embody that strength that Mary had. And I tell her that you're carrying the name of Mary, and it's such a responsibility, and it's such a beauty, and it's such a strength. And my little Moses, and I love the story of Moses as well. He was not a perfect prophet in the sense that he's done many like mistakes. Like, he was a very relatable prophet. You know, I wouldn't say mistakes, but he's for me, I just love his stories of like trial, and I call him my little hurricane. He's really taught me the essence of motherhood, because my other two children were so like, oh, Zen, and then comes Musa, and it's like, I really have to step into my role, both as a mother and as a protector, so and as a guider. So I teach them through the fundamentals of love and the message of the truth and the universal truth, and then the stories, and then practice as well. Through practice, I think children definitely learn more through example than they do through sitting down and talking about, you know, you ought to do this and that.
So how do you practice with them? What do you do?
So they see me pray. So I'm like, oh, I have to pray. And then they sort of sit next to me. What do you want to pray for? You can ask. And then sometimes they're like, I wish I had it. Or, you know, like, I wish we did this as, you know, as an experience. And just them knowing that, you know, prayers are not limited to adults, and that it's a language that can both be spoken by adults and children and all of humankind. And just seeing me in practice. So much of the things that I've eliminated through my journaling is, you know, sabotaging self-talk, thinking, giving people the benefit of the doubt, so that when someone is mean or whatever, I'm just like, you know, they're on their journey, and we can't take that personally. And again, going back to my favorite quote, and it's also, you know, in faith and taught to us spiritually. And then we've also had the amazing privilege of being able to travel to Mekka, and I really want to take them to, you know, Jerusalem one day. I really want them to experience different spiritual sites, and history, and they go, so that's how I teach them. Well, I try anyway.
I feel like you're doing a great job, and like it sounds amazing actually. And I feel like, as you say, like teaching love and teaching, I guess, like the meaning more of like life and existence, and like compassion and values, like sharing values more than concepts. I guess that's like super, super beautiful. And but now you have to tell me, because I feel like you're the first person I know who traveled to Mekka. When was that, and how was that?
The first time was when I was so heavily pregnant with my second child, and it was a gift by my dad. He found out later on that I suffered postnatal depression with my first child. So with my second child, I'm such a prude with my parents. So sometimes when I get pregnant, I'm like, I'm just somehow stumbled and got pregnant, and I have a bump now. So my dad found out really later that I was pregnant. He was like, that's amazing. Guess what? I want to treat you. And I was like, where? So he said, I want us all to experience a trip to Mekka. So it's me, my dad, my husband, and I left my son with my sister at the time. So that was my first time. I was 8 months pregnant, and that's where the name Maryam was inspired by, because I didn't have a name. At 8 months pregnant, I still didn't have a name. How I felt, honestly, as a pregnant woman, because there's also a story in both the Bible and the Quran, the story of Hajar. I don't know the biblical translation for her name, but she's the mother of Israel, I think. So Ismail. She's the mother. She was the wife of Prophet Ibrahim, where she's had to run between 2 mounts of Safa and Marwa. And shortly after me doing that experience, pregnant, was just so profound. And I was able to do so many things. And, you know, when you see like a holy site in pictures and TV, in a textbook, and then you're finally able to experience it, I think for a moment I had a sort of out of body experience. I was like, am I really here? What is going on? Yeah, so that was amazing. And I was with my parents, which was also special because I felt like a child, even though I was pregnant. I was traveling with my husband and two of my other siblings and his family. I felt like I had my parents' love again. My parents were so careful with me and, you know, holding my hands and, you know, like pushing people aside because it gets really busy. And they're like, oh, you know, my daughter's pregnant, give space. So that was nice, having that treatment and just seeing them. And another thing, I accompanied them to a date one day. My parents are so loving. They demonstrate love so beautifully. So one day I accompanied them. I just followed them. They were going out on a date and I just followed them. And they were holding hands. So as soon as my mom's, and they're African parents, by the way, which like intimacy for them is just like, what? You just came about in a blink. Probably explains why I'm such a prude sometimes. But I saw them holding hands and I got my camera out to take a photo. And as soon as my mom noticed, she turned around and she was like, ah! And then my dad went on to put his arm around her and like hug her closer, which was just some of the most fondest memories of that trip. And I'm like, hey guys, I'm just waddling behind you. I want to just accompany you to this date. And yeah, had dinner. It was lovely. So yeah, those are the moments and the memories that I had on the trip. That was my first time, yeah.
Wow.
And the second time was when I was pregnant with Musa. Yeah, and it was a very early pregnancy, so I was still feeling really sick. And but it was lovely seeing the other two enjoy and see the holy site and just be like so amazed. And now when I tell them stories, they're like, "We've been there, Mommy. We've been there." So yeah, that was the second time.
Wow, amazing.
Yeah.
Oh. Wow, I guess thank you for sharing all these beautiful, like super inspiring stories. And I see that it's a lot about love in your life and faith and happiness. I wish you like all the best on your journey, on your own journey and your journey of raising your beautiful children and the way you do. And thank you so much for being you and sharing all of this. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this platform. Thank you for you. Thank you for being the most phenomenal yoga teacher. Honestly, I used to love your classes and I can't wait for you to come back to Nairobi. Thank you for collecting these beautiful stories from phenomenal women around the world. And gratitude really definitely puts a different perspective to things in life, because if you worry about the woes, you'll find them in every corner. But if you think about the bigger picture and the beauty, the simplicity and the beauty around us, we will find moments of happiness and joy for sure.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Right too. Thank you too.
I hope you enjoyed listening to this episode, and I didn't promise too much. I think it's very inspiring to hear how Alham is raising her children. If you happen to be in Nairobi, please come to Bikram Yoga Nairobi and try a class, meet this amazing community, and experience this transforming yoga yourself. I will be there for the following 2 months teaching, and I would love to meet you there. Also, I'm organizing a yoga retreat in Diani from the 14th until 20th of March, and we have a couple of places left. So if you're here in Kenya, make sure you book your space. We also have people coming from Europe, and we are doing a safari after the retreat. So come to Kenya. It's such a wonderful country with warm and welcoming people, and I'm sure you will love it here as well. You can find more information on my website, happiness-safari.com. I wish you a wonderful day, no matter where in the world you are. I'm so happy you took the time to listen, whether you are walking, cycling, cooking, or whatever you're doing. I'm always so happy to hear from you. So please let me know how you liked this episode. Comment on my Instagram or write me a personal message, and please share the podcast with your friends. I'm looking forward to connecting with you. Have a great week. Be happy. Love and namaste.